Pretend you know me." She whispered it against the broadest back in the casino. Rain still dripped from her scarlet dress. Two men with guns had just stepped through the velvet curtain behind her. Naomi Carter, 29, an event florist from Inglewood, had been running for 9 blocks in stilettos. Her ex-boyfriend Marcus had sold her name to the wrong people. She picked the first stranger at the bar, the wrong stranger, the most dangerous man in Koreatown. Han Sung-ho turned slowly. 6'4", black shirt stretched over a wall of muscle, a thorned rose tattoo climbing the left side of his neck. The Crimson Lotus called him by another name. The streets called him Jang-mi, the rose of the Korean Mafia. He looked at her. He looked at the men with the guns. He smiled. Once. Then his hand slid behind her neck and he kissed her like he owned her. The casino went silent. Chips stopped clicking. The men at the curtain saw the tattoo and lowered their weapons in pure terror. One of them was already shaking. Han wiped the lipstick from his thumb. He leaned to her ear. "They were going to kill you. Now that you're mine, I decide your fate." She had asked a stranger to pretend. He decided to make it real. And what she did inside his fortress on Wilshire the next morning. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. The stiletto heel snapped on the curb, and Naomi Carter almost ate the wet pavement. She caught herself on a parking meter, ripped both sandals off, and ran barefoot down 6th Street with the broken pair clutched in her left hand. Koreatown at 11 on a Tuesday smelled of fryer oil and rain. Neon from a karaoke sign painted her scarlet satin dress an uglier red, the color of something already bleeding. Behind her, 3 sets of footsteps, not running, walking fast, spread wide so she couldn't double back. That was worse than running. "Naomi," the voice behind her was almost gentle. "Slow down, sweetheart. You're embarrassing yourself." She did not slow down. 20 minutes ago, she had been in the back booth at the bar on 8th where Marcus Reed had told her to wait. 3 Korean men in cheap black suits, 1 white guy with a neck tattoo who'd flicked open a butterfly knife under the table while Marcus signed something. Marcus had handed over her purse, his weak chin trembling, his wrinkled gray suit dark at the armpits. "It's just collateral, baby. Just till Sunday." Collateral. The white guy had unzipped her purse and taken out her ID, her phone, her tube of MAC Ruby Woo. He had read her Inglewood address out loud and smiled at her like a man reading a receipt. She had stood up calmly, walked past the hostess, pushed open the back door, and then she had run, and now the back door was 4 blocks behind her, and her lungs were full of glass. A neon lotus bloomed across the wet street, 6 stories on a black glass building with no street number, only the flower and the English word beneath it, crimson. 2 valets in black suits stood under a black awning, hands folded. A black Maybach idled at the curb. She crossed Western on a diagonal. A scooter swerved and the rider swore in Spanish. The valets stepped together to block her, and she said the only word she had, "Please." The shorter valet's eyes flicked past her shoulder and read the 3 sets of footsteps. He saw the scarlet dress, the bare feet, the broken sandals in her fist. He saw something in her face the taller valet did not see. The shorter valet stepped aside. She went through the door before the taller one could close it. Inside was a temperature drop and a sound drop and the smell of black tea and money. A foyer of black marble and a brass lotus inlaid in the floor, and a Korean woman in a high-collared black dress behind a podium, who did not blink at the barefoot black woman in scarlet satin who had just blown through the door dripping rain on the marble. The hostess's eyes moved exactly the way the valet's had, past her, behind her, then back. "Member?" the hostess said, soft voice, almost bored. Naomi could see, through the second set of glass doors behind the podium, the VIP floor. A low room, lit in the color of pomegranate seeds, baccarat tables, a long bar of backlit onyx, men in suits that cost more than her rent, and women in dresses that cost more than her car, and not a single phone visible in a single hand, because in here, phones were a rudeness. "Member," the hostess said again, the same softness, a door already closing. The front door behind her opened. She did not turn around. She did not have to. The shorter valet's posture in her peripheral vision went from folded hands to spread feet, and the hostess's eyes moved past Naomi's shoulder one more time, and this time they stayed there a second too long, and something in the hostess's mouth tightened. Naomi looked through the inner doors at the bar. She did not see his face. She saw a back, just a back, at the far end of the onyx bar, on the last stool, alone. The back was enormous, not gym thick, door thick. Shoulders so wide, the black dress shirt across them looked like a sail under tension, the fabric pulled into shallow ridges over what had to be the muscle of the upper back. A V cut, so severe from shoulder to waist, that even at 30 feet, it read as a warning shape. The shirt was open 2 buttons at the collar. Black hair swept clean off the neck in a center part that fell to either side, and on the left side of that neck, climbing out of the collar, was the green-black stem of a tattoo, a thorned stem, one small rose at the top. She did not know what the rose meant. She knew that every other man in the room was sitting at least 1 stool away from him. The hostess said, "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you." Naomi pushed through the inner doors. The pomegranate light closed over her. The bartender in a black vest looked up and did not move. A dealer's eyes flicked to a camera in the ceiling. The room did not go silent. It went attentive. She walked the length of the bar with sandals in her left hand and rain in her hair, the dress sticking to her thighs. Behind her, in the foyer, the front doors opened again, 3 sets of footsteps, walking fast, spreading. She reached the last stool. Up close, the back was bigger. The hand resting on a small glass of amber liquid was built to break a wrist without trying. No ring on the finger. A watch on the left wrist that probably cost more than her mother's house. She did not knock. She did not introduce. She did not ask. She stepped between his stool and the empty one beside it, planted her free hand flat on the onyx bar so he would feel the wet of her palm against the cold of the stone, leaned her body in until her hip pressed his thigh and her wet hair brushed the warm skin of his throat, and she put her mouth an inch from his ear and she breathed the only sentence she had left. "Pretend you know me." He did not jump. He did not flinch. His shoulder under her cheek did not tense by a millimeter. The glass of amber liquid in his hand did not so much as ripple. For 1 whole second, nothing on earth happened. Then his head turned, slowly, toward her, and she got the face for the first time. He was Korean, and he was 36, and he had the jaw of a statue someone had broken into a man, oval cut to a diamond at the chin, cheekbones high enough to throw their own shadow, a straight nose, a mouth that did not move, and eyes, almond, almost black, pupil indistinguishable from iris in this light, that did the only thing in the room that was not pretending. They went over her in one pass, wet hair, wet dress, bare feet, sandals in her fist, the pulse jumping in the hollow of her throat where the gold chain had twisted sideways. And then those eyes lifted, past her shoulder, to the front of the room, and read in a quarter second what she had brought into his house. He did not smile. He did not speak. He did not move his right hand off the glass. He lifted his left hand. It came up between their bodies, and the back of his knuckles brushed her jaw, and his thumb came to rest at the corner of her mouth, where the lipstick had smudged from where she'd bitten her lip outside. His skin was warm and dry, and the calluses on the pad of the thumb were old. He turned her face an inch toward him, just an inch, a man examining merchandise he had not yet decided to buy. "Breathe out," he said. The voice was low and unhurried, and the English had almost no accent, only a faint shaping at the back of the consonants. Slowly, once. She breathed out. The breath shook on the way out. He felt it on his wrist. Something at the very back of his eyes moved. Not pity, not interest. Recognition. The way a man recognizes a tool that has been put into his hand for a purpose he did not ask for, and will now use anyway. 3? He said, still soft, not to her exactly, a question to the air. She nodded against his thumb. 3. Knife? 1. White man. Pocket. Marcus, he said, and it was not a question, and the floor went out from under her because she had not said the name. She had not said any name, and his eyes did not leave her face while he said it. And somewhere behind her, on the other side of the room, she heard the brass front handle of the inner door turn, and the bartender across the bar from them, who had not moved this entire time, very quietly set down the glass he had been pretending to polish, and stepped 1 pace back from the bar, and put both his hands where everyone in the room could see them. The man on the stool slid his right hand off his glass. He did not reach for anything. He simply, with the gentle authority of a man rearranging a chess piece, took her broken sandals out of her left fist, set them on the bar, took her left hand in his right, and turned her so that her back came to rest against the onyx, and her front came to rest against the wall of his chest. And he was standing now. He had stood up without her feeling it, and he was even taller than the back had told her, and the room behind her had gone, finally, completely silent. His left hand slid up under the wet curtain of her hair. His palm found the back of her neck. His fingers spread there, warm, enormous, possessive in a way that was older than language. He tilted her face up to his. His mouth was very close. The amber on his breath was something old and expensive she did not have a name for. "Eyes on me," he said. "Not them, me." Her eyes locked on his. He smiled. It was the smallest smile she had ever seen on a human face, just the inside corner of his upper lip, lifting 1/2 millimeter on the left. It did not reach the eyes. It was not for her. It was for whoever was now standing 8 feet behind her, with one hand still in his pocket, and a butterfly knife still folded inside it. And she watched, in the polished black of his pupils, the reflection of that smile arrive on the men at her back. His mouth had not yet touched hers when the room behind her did the thing she would remember for the rest of her life. It did not gasp. It did not scream. It simply, in one coordinated breath, leaned back. Every chair on the floor scraped a 1/4 inch away from the bar. Every dealer at every table set both palms flat on the felt. Every woman in every dress let her eyes drop to the rim of her glass. A man at the high-stakes baccarat table on the far wall stood up so smoothly it looked like a yawn and walked, without hurry, toward the side hall that led to the kitchens. She understood, with the part of her that had never been in a room like this before, and would never be out of one again, that she had just walked a bomb into a bank vault, and that the bomb had a name everyone in this room knew except her. The men who had come in behind her had stopped. She could see them now, faintly, in the polished black of the glass behind the bottles on the back bar. The white guy with the butterfly knife was in front. The 2 Korean men in the cheap black suits were a half step behind him at his shoulders. The white guy's mouth was open, not for breath, for a word he had started to say and then forgotten the middle of. He was looking at the back of the head of the man holding Naomi. He was looking at the green-black stem of the rose tattoo, where it climbed out of the open collar of the black dress shirt, and he had gone, under the bad pomegranate light, the color of skim milk. The Korean man on his left, the older one with gray at the temples, said one syllable in Korean under his breath. It sounded like a prayer her grandmother used to mumble before crossing a freeway. The Korean on the right lifted both hands shoulder-high, empty, where the cameras could see. Then, with the telegraphed slowness of a man diffusing something while standing on it, he reached 2 fingers into the inside breast pocket of his cheap suit, lifted a small black pistol out by its barrel, and set it on the carpet at his feet. The older one followed, a second pistol, a folding knife. From the white guy, the butterfly knife, set on the carpet beside the rest, his hand shaking so badly She could see the tremor from across the room. The man holding her had not looked at them once. His thumb was still at the corner of her mouth. His palm was still at the back of her neck. The smallest smile was still on the inside of his upper lip, and his eyes, when she made herself look back into them, were not warm. They were not cruel. They were calculating, the way a butcher's eyes are calculating over a side of beef, the way a chess player's eyes are calculating 3 moves into a line that is already won. He was looking at her face and pricing what had just landed in his hand. Eyes, he said again. Very soft, almost kind. She kept her eyes on his. He bent his head. The first touch of his mouth was nothing. A brush, a question, a test of whether she would jerk away. She did not jerk away. She had nowhere left to jerk to. She had a wall of muscle and Egyptian cotton at her back, and an open room of men kneeling for guns at her front, and a thumb at the corner of her mouth that had not moved a millimeter since it arrived. And so she did the only thing left, which was to open her mouth a 1/4 inch under his, and let him in. He took the invitation the way he had taken her sandals, without hurry, without asking twice. The kiss, when it landed for real, was not the kiss of a stranger pretending. It was the kiss of a man putting a brand on a piece of property in front of witnesses. His left hand fisted slowly in the wet hair at the back of her skull, not pulling, only closing, only declaring. His right arm came around the small of her back, and the flat of his palm spread there over the wet satin and lifted her a full inch off the floor against the front of his body, so that every man in the room could see her feet leave the ground. His mouth opened hers without effort. The taste was smoke, an aged something, and a heat under it she had not had in her mouth in 3 years of dating Marcus Reed. She made a sound into him. She did not mean to. He heard it. The smile she had seen as a flicker became, against her mouth, the briefest curve. He let her down. Her bare feet found the floor. The kiss ended the way it had begun, slow, decided. His thumb back at the corner of her mouth to wipe a smear of ruby woo off the perfect skin above his upper lip, and onto her cheekbone, where it sat like a small bright mark of ownership. He did not look at her while he wiped his thumb clean on the lapel of his own black shirt. He looked, finally, at the men by the door. The white guy with the butterfly knife was on his knees. She had not seen him go down. The 2 Koreans were lower, foreheads almost to the carpet. The older one was speaking now, fast and low, in Korean, the words tumbling, the tone of a man, explaining to a judge that there has been a clerical error, a misunderstanding, a name on a piece of paper that should not have been on that piece of paper. The bartender behind the onyx had moved another step back and put his hands flat on the back counter where they could be seen. The hostess at the podium in the foyer had picked up a black telephone and was holding it to her ear and saying nothing into it, only listening for an instruction that had not yet come. The man whose chest Naomi was leaned against finally spoke, not to her, to them, in English because he wanted her to hear it. "You came into my house," he said, "with my woman." The older Korean's forehead touched carpet. "They were going to kill you," he said. The pronoun shifted. The mouth came back to the soft place beside her ear. The thumb brushed her jaw once, almost tender, almost a promise. "Now that you are mine, I decide your fate." Her knees did not buckle. She had been raised by a woman who did not allow buckling, but somewhere inside her chest, a small bright thing she had been carrying since the back booth at the bar on 8th, a small bright thing, called, "I can still fix this myself," went quietly, finally out. The front doors opened a 3rd time. 2 more men in black suits came in from the rain, walked past the kneeling 3 without breaking stride, and took position at his shoulders. He turned her so she faced the room, so every face could see, on her cheekbone, the small bright mark of ruby woo where his thumb had put it. "Look at her," he said, soft, to the room, in English. Every face on the floor lifted. "Her name," he said, and here at last he paused, and she felt his breath move the wet hair at her temple. and she understood that he had read it off the driver's license in her purse before she had finished her first breath in his arms, the same way he had read Marcus, the same way he had read the 3 men at the door. Is Naomi? The room did not answer. The room did not have to. The room simply, like a single animal, lowered its eyes. His hand spread possessively across her belly through the wet scarlet satin. "Anyone," he said, "who touches her, touches me." Somewhere across the city, a siren started and stopped. The rain on the awning outside got heavier. The hostess at the podium very quietly put the black telephone back in its cradle, and Naomi Carter, barefoot, branded, breathing, stood in the curve of the most dangerous man in Koreatown and understood, with absolute clarity, that the door she had walked through 45 seconds ago was not a door she would ever walk back out of, as the woman who had walked in. His thumb hadn't left the corner of her mouth. It rested there like a comma, like a man marking a place in a book he intended to come back to, and the casino floor of the Crimson Lotus held its breath around the gesture. The roulette wheel had stopped clicking. The dealer at the nearest baccarat table was frozen mid-deal, 2 cards suspended above the felt. Even the speakers, which a moment ago had been bleating some low Korean ballad under the chandeliers, seemed to have lowered themselves to a polite hush, as if the building itself understood that something had just been claimed and did not want to be caught speaking over it. Naomi could feel her own pulse in the soft skin under his thumb. She could feel the heat of the satin against her thighs, where his other hand had pressed her into him during the kiss. She could feel the long, flat plane of his chest under the black Egyptian cotton, the way the buttons had pushed against her sternum, the way his belt buckle had bitten into the curve of her hip bone through the dress. None of that was the part her body was screaming about. The part her body was screaming about was simpler. He had not let go. The 3 men by the velvet rope had not let go of their weapons either, but the weapons were down now, pointed at the carpet, pointed at their own polished shoes. One of them, the bald one in the cheap leather jacket who had been 10 feet behind her on 6th Street 30 seconds ago, was looking at the left side of Han Sung-ho's neck with the specific stillness of a man calculating exactly how long he had left to live. The collar of the black shirt had shifted in the kiss. Just an inch, just enough. The thorned stem of the rose tattoo ran out from under the cotton like ink poured down a column of muscle, and the single small blooming rose sat at the hinge of his jaw, where everyone in the room with 2 functioning eyes could read it. Read it and know what it meant. Read it and know which of the 6 families in Koreatown had just placed a hand on the back of the black woman in the scarlet dress. The bald man dropped to one knee. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The other 2 followed him down half a second later, the way pigeons go up off a wire all at once, because the first one moved. 3 foreheads to the burgundy carpet. 3 pistols laid flat with the muzzles pointed away. The bald one's hands were shaking so badly, the slide of his gun rattled against the floor like a coin in a tin cup. Naomi had never seen grown men kneel before. Not like that. Not in real life. In real life, men did not put their faces on the ground. Ever. For anyone. She felt the kneeling enter her bloodstream the way the kiss had. A second wave of something her nervous system did not have a category for. Han had not looked at them yet. He was still looking at her. Dark almond eyes, no warmth in them, no triumph, no curiosity even. Just the quiet, weighing attention of a man who had been handed an unmarked package and was deciding, slowly, whether to open it now or carry it home first. His thumb moved a single millimeter, wiped a smear of her own lipstick off the corner of her lower lip. He looked at the red on the pad of his thumb, looked at her mouth again, and then, in a voice that was so low it almost wasn't a voice at all, a vibration she felt more in her sternum than heard in her ears, he spoke. "They were going to kill you." It was not a question. Naomi tried to swallow and discovered her throat would not perform that function on command anymore. She managed a nod, a small one, the kind of nod a child gives when caught. "Now that you are mine," he said, in the same quiet, almost gentle register, "I decide your fate." He said it in English. He said it slowly, the way a man speaks who has all the time in the world and no interest at all in being misunderstood. The Korean accent under the words was almost invisible, sanded down by years of expensive schooling, but the architecture of the sentence was foreign. "Now that you are mine," not "now you are mine," the small grammatical step of a man translating from a language that did not waste verbs. She nodded again. She didn't know what else her body was supposed to do. Behind him, a second figure had detached itself from the wall. Tall, lean, thin-rimmed glasses catching the chandelier light, a black suit with no tie, the collar of the white shirt buttoned all the way to the throat. The man moved with the practiced quiet of someone whose job description had no written version. He stopped at Han's left shoulder, hands loose at his sides, and did not look at Naomi at all. He looked at the three men on the carpet. "Baek," Han said, without turning his head. "Sajangnim," the kneeling ones, whose dogs. Baek Jun-woo's eyes moved across the bald man's jacket, the cheap leather, the visible band of a wristwatch too expensive for the rest of the outfit. He did not need long. Cho Min-jae's runners, Yongpa, second tier, sent for collection, not for a hit, the hit they decided on themselves when she ran. The word Yongpa moved through the room like a draft under a door. Naomi watched the dealer at the baccarat table close his eyes for half a second, the way a man closes them when he hears his own street named in a hospital report. Han nodded, once. Still no expression. They saw the tattoo. They saw it. Then they understand what they did. They understand. There was a pause then, the length of one slow human breath. Naomi realized with the strange clarity that fear gives, that the pause was the part of the conversation where the three men on the carpet were being killed. Not physically, not yet, procedurally. Somewhere in the bookkeeping of this room, a line had been drawn through three names, and the rest was just logistics. "Take them to the back," Han said. "I want to know who sent collection on a woman alone, on foot, in my district. I want the name on paper before the floor is mopped." "Yes, Sajangnim." Bak lifted one hand. From behind the velvet rope, from behind the dragon screen, from doorways Naomi had not even registered as doorways, 6 men in identical black suits moved in a single coordinated drift. They did not raise their voices. They did not raise their hands. They simply collected the 3 kneeling men, the way ushers collect programs after a show, lifting them under the elbows, walking them through a door behind the bar that Naomi would not have known was a door. The bald man tried to look back at her once, his mouth opening on what might have been an apology or a curse, and the suit at his right elbow turned his face forward again with a single finger under the jaw. The door closed. The carpet where they had knelt was empty. The whole removal had taken perhaps 11 seconds. Naomi understood, watching the door click shut, that she would never see those 3 men again. Not in this life, not in any photograph, not as a name in any newspaper. They had walked into the Crimson Lotus tonight, and they were not going to walk anywhere ever again. And the reason was that they had chased a barefoot woman down 6th Street into the wrong man's bar. She should have felt relief. She was waiting for the relief. What she felt instead was the slow, cold understanding that the relief was not coming. That the 3 men on the carpet had been one kind of problem, a problem with running shoes and a deadline, and what she was standing inside of now was a different kind of problem entirely, a problem with a chandelier and a thumb on her lip and a sentence that began with, "Now that you are mine." Han turned his head, finally, and looked at the room. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. The room was already looking at him. He let his eyes move across the baccarat table, across the roulette dealer, across the 2 old men in gray jackets at the corner table, who had not stopped sipping their tea through any of it because they had seen worse in 1987 and were too tired to perform shock. His gaze did the work that a microphone would have done for a smaller man. "My apologies," he said, in Korean now, the syllables clipped and formal. "The evening continues. The first round at every table is on the house. Please." The roulette wheel began to click again before he had finished the sentence. The dealer at the baccarat table laid down his suspended cards as if nothing had happened. The Korean ballad in the speakers, which Naomi was now sure had never actually stopped, swelled back up to its previous volume. Within 12 seconds, the floor of the Crimson Lotus had returned to its normal Tuesday night business of separating the foolish from their money, and the only evidence that anything had happened at all was the slight darker patch on the carpet where one of the kneeling men had wet himself, and the woman in the scarlet dress still standing inside the curve of Han Sung-ho's arm. He looked down at her. The first time, she realized, that he had really looked. His eyes moved across her face, the way Beck's eyes had moved across the bald man's jacket. Reading, cataloging. He registered the smeared mascara under her right eye, the place at her hairline where the rain had wet down the silky body wave and left a dark curl pressed to her temple. He registered the small cut on the side of her foot, the one she had not known she had, that was leaving a print on his polished marble every time she shifted her weight. He registered the broken pair of stiletto sandals still clutched in her left hand, the snapped heel jutting like a small black tooth. He registered, last of all, that her free hand was still flat against his chest. She had not moved it since the kiss. She had not realized she had not moved it. She started to pull it back. He covered it with his own hand and pressed it back into place against the cotton over his sternum, gently, the way a man returns a misplaced object to the shelf where it belongs. "Do not," he said quietly, "take your hand off me yet. The room is still watching." Naomi's mouth opened on what might have been a question, and what came out instead was a small, dry, "Okay, good." He looked up over her head, scanned the floor once more, and then, in a slightly louder voice, in English, for the benefit of any tourist or visiting buyer who needed the translation, he said, "My woman has had a difficult evening. We are going upstairs. My woman." 2 syllables in a casino in Koreatown, and Naomi felt them land on her chest like a coat she had not asked to be helped into. She felt the room hear them. She felt the dealer at the baccarat table hear them. She felt the old men at the corner table glance up from their tea, register the phrase, register her face, and file the combination of those two things away in whatever ledger old men in gray jackets kept in places like this. He turned her with one hand at the small of her back, not pushing, guiding, the way a man steers a horse he respects. The crowd at the velvet rope had already parted, not by command, by instinct, the way water parts around a hull. Beck had appeared again at his other shoulder, this time with a long black overcoat folded over his forearm. Han took it without looking, shook it out one-handed, and dropped it over Naomi's shoulders. The wool fell almost to her ankles. It smelled of cedar and something darker, like expensive tobacco, that had never actually been smoked. "Your shoes," he said. "Broken." "I see." He glanced down at her bare feet on the marble, at the small red print her cut sole was leaving, and something passed across his face that was not a smile, but was perhaps the place a smile would have lived in a different man. He bent. He did it without ceremony, without making it a gesture, the way a man bends to pick up a dropped key, one arm behind her knees, one across her back, and she was up against his chest before her brain had finished the sentence, "He is going to lift me." The wool coat fell open over her thighs. She caught it with her free hand, the broken sandals still hanging from her fingers like dead birds, and she did not have time to be embarrassed because they were already moving. He carried her across the casino floor as if she weighed nothing, as if the carrying itself were a kind of statement that no one in the room was permitted to misread. The roulette wheel kept clicking, the dealer kept dealing, the old men kept sipping, but every eye in the Crimson Lotus tracked the progress of the black woman in the scarlet dress, wrapped in the boss's coat, held against the boss's chest, being carried barefoot through the velvet rope toward the private elevator at the back of the room. Naomi could feel the eyes the way you feel sunlight through a window in winter. Specific, warm, not friendly. The elevator doors were already open, mirrored, lit from above by a single warm bulb. Beck stood holding the doors with one gloved hand and his eyes on the carpet, and as Hans stepped inside with her in his arms, Beck finally allowed himself one quick look at her face. It was not curiosity, it was not approval. It was the look of a man taking measurements for a tailor he had not yet been told to call. The doors closed. In the mirrored wall of the elevator, Naomi saw herself for the first time since the bar. Saw the smudge of his lipstick, no, her lipstick, transferred onto the corner of his mouth and back again, a small red ghost. Saw her own eyes, too large, too dark, too awake. Saw the long line of him holding her, the black shirt, the unsmiling jaw, the discreet bloom of the rose at his throat. Saw the two of them framed by warm light in a polished box that was already rising, smoothly, silently, away from the casino and away from 6th Street, and away from the broken-heeled woman who had crashed through the door 45 seconds ago begging a stranger to pretend. He had not pretended. That was the thing her brain kept arriving at and skidding off of. He had not pretended. He had answered. He had answered with a kiss that had emptied a room and a sentence that had emptied her future. And now the elevator was climbing, and she did not know which floor it was climbing to, and she understood. With the same absolute clarity she had felt downstairs in the curve of his arm, that the floor did not actually matter. Wherever the elevator stopped, the woman who stepped out of it was going to be a different woman than the one who had stepped in. He shifted her weight slightly against his chest, looked down. The dark almond eyes found hers in the mirror first, then in person. "What is your name?" he said. Not a question, a request for information he intended to use. "Naomi." Her voice was a stranger's. "Naomi Carter." "Naomi." He said it once, as if testing the shape of it in his mouth. The Korean accent gave the second syllable a small weight her own family had never put there. "Naomi Carter. Psh, you will tell me, upstairs, who sent 3 Yongpa runners after you on foot, in the rain, in my district, on a Tuesday." He paused. The elevator was still rising. "And then I will tell you what your life looks like now." She did not answer. She could not answer. The elevator slowed, settled, chimed once, soft as a spoon against porcelain. The doors opened on a long corridor of black walnut and warm low light, and Han Sung-ho stepped out of the mirrored box, carrying Naomi Carter in his arms, and somewhere far below them, in a back room behind the bar of the Crimson Lotus, 3 men who had chased a barefoot woman down 6th Street were already learning, in detail, exactly what the rose at his throat had always meant. The corridor smelled of cedar and cold steel. Han walked it like a man who had measured every plank, his shoes silent on the dark walnut, Naomi still cradled against his chest. The scarlet dress had ridden up against his forearm. Her bare feet, scraped raw from 6th Street, hung over his other arm like something that had finally stopped running. She had not spoken since the elevator. Neither had he. At the end of the corridor, a single door waited. Matte black, no handle. Han stopped in front of it, said nothing. A soft click came from inside the wall and the door swung inward on its own weight. Bulletproof, she registered later. At that moment, all she saw was the room beyond it, and the city beyond that. Wilshire spread out under them in a quiet grid of lights, low and orange and endless, the kind of view that made small people feel large and large people feel watched. The penthouse was 3 stories above the rest of the building and walled in floor-to-ceiling glass on 2 sides, black marble floors, low charcoal sofas, a long obsidian dining table she would later learn had been carved from a single slab, no art on the walls, no photographs, a home that refused to confess anything about the man who lived in it. He set her down on the edge of the sofa, as if she were made of pressed paper, knelt. Took her left foot in his hand. The size difference was almost comic, his palm swallowing her heel entirely. He turned the foot, examined the cut along the arch where a piece of asphalt had opened her skin, somewhere between the casino door and the alley. His expression did not change. He simply rose, walked to a low cabinet, returned with a flat black case, opened it, and began cleaning the wound with movements so practiced they looked bored. You do this often, she said. Her voice came out drier than she wanted. Often enough. The antiseptic burned. She did not flinch. He noticed. His dark almond eyes lifted to her face for 1 second, registered the held breath, the tightened jaw, and returned to the work without comment. A small adhesive strip, a second one along the heel. He pressed his thumb to it to seal it, and the heat of that thumb against her bare skin sent a current up her leg that she pretended not to feel. Your phone. What? Your phone, Miss Carter. She blinked. How do you know my name? He stood, walked to the obsidian table, picked up a black tablet that had been waiting there, brought it to her. On the screen, her driver's license, her lease in Inglewood, her last 3 bank statements, a photograph of her standing outside the pediatric dental office on Crenshaw, where she worked reception, the address of her mother's house in Compton, her sister's name, the school her nephew attended, all of it gathered in the 8 minutes since the elevator had begun to rise. I know everything, he said. Quiet, not a threat. A weather report. I needed to know what I just bought. The word landed like a slap. She set her jaw. I am not for sale. No. He sat across from her, finally, on the low table itself, elbows on knees, the rose tattoo at his throat visible now in the warm light. You were already sold. By a man named Marcus Reed, to a man named Cho Min-jae. For a debt of $412,000 on football games, he should have stopped betting 6 years ago. Cho was going to collect you tonight. Cho's men chased you down 6th Street. Cho's men are the reason your foot is bleeding on my sofa. The room tilted. Not the room. Something inside her. The name Marcus felt like a stone she had been carrying without knowing it, and someone had just taken it out of her pocket and set it on the table between them. He wouldn't, she said. The words came out thin. He wouldn't. He did. 3 weeks ago. There is paper. There are witnesses. Han tilted his head a fraction. There is no version of tonight in which you walked into the Crimson Lotus by accident, Miss Carter. You were herded. You ran in the direction they wanted you to run. The only thing that did not go according to plan was who you reached for at the bar. And she stared at the tablet, at her own face under the dental office awning, smiling at someone outside the frame, a woman who had 3 weeks ago still believed she lived in a city where the worst thing about Marcus Reed was that he texted too much. She set the tablet face down on the marble, did not let her hand shake, looked up, then unsell me. He almost smiled, the second smile of the night. It did not reach his eyes, but it pulled at one corner of his mouth, and on a face built like his, that was the difference between a wall and a door. That is not how the world I live in works. Make it work that way. He studied her. For a long count, the cold, predatory intensity behind his eyes shifted, very slightly, into something that was not quite warmth, but was at least curiosity. A man accustomed to women crumpling in this room was being looked at, evenly, by one who would not. You are inside the Jangmi Pa, he said finally. From the moment my mouth touched yours on the casino floor, every man with a phone in that building made the same call. Cho knows. Cho's father knows. The council in Hanam will know before sunrise. The mark on you is not paint, Miss Carter. It is bone deep. Within the territory of this city, no one will touch you. Outside it, no one will dare. That is the cage. It is also the only thing standing between your sister's school pickup tomorrow and a van. She held his eyes. And what does the cage cost? Nothing you would not already pay to keep them alive. Say it plainly. You stay where I can see you. You do not leave this floor without me or without Bay. You do not contact Marcus. You do not contact anyone about Marcus. When I ask you a question, you answer it without lying. A pause. That is the contract. And in return, he said, Marcus Reed will not see Friday. Silence. Outside, somewhere far below, a siren rose and faded and was forgotten. Naomi felt her own pulse in the cut on her foot. She thought of Marcus's wrinkled gray suit on the steps of the Long Beach courthouse last Christmas, drunk, swearing he had turned a corner. She thought of the way he had asked, 2 weeks ago, very casually over the phone, what time she usually got off work. She thought of the van Han had just described, idling somewhere in a parking lot she had walked past 100 times. "No," she said. His head lifted half an inch. "No? You will not kill him, Miss Carter." "Naomi." A beat. "Naomi. The man sold your body to settle a parlay. Explain to me the version of this where he keeps breathing. Because if you kill him for what he did to me," she said, slowly, "then the first thing I become inside your house is a reason men die. I will not start there. Take everything he has. Take the apartment, the car, the watch his father left him, the office on Atlantic. Take his name out of every database he uses to book a hotel room. Leave him standing in the rain with nothing. Let him understand, but you will not put a bullet in him on my account tonight." He looked at her for a very long time. The penthouse was so quiet she could hear the soft mechanical breathing of the climate system. Somewhere in the kitchen, a refrigerator clicked. "You are negotiating," he said, "in your own cage, on your first hour. I am telling you the terms I can live with. There is a word in my language," he said, "for a person who, with no leverage at all, still tries to set the price. It is not a flattering word, but it is the word people use about kings." He stood, walked to the glass, pressed the pad of his thumb to a panel set into the frame, and a section of the wall slid back, revealing a small recessed room, monitors, 2 black handguns laid out on velvet, a row of phones. He picked up one of the phones without turning around. Bake. A pause. Yes, the Reed problem, revised parameters. He does not die tonight. He does not die this week. He loses everything else. Tonight. By sunrise, the office on Atlantic is no longer his. By breakfast, the apartment is no longer his. The accounts go to 0. The credit lines burn. The car is gone before he wakes up to look for it. Every casino in the county receives his photograph by 9 a.m. with instructions. He becomes a man no one in Los Angeles County will rent a room to, sell a drink to, or extend $1 of credit to. Are we clear? Another pause. And Cho. The territorial insult is filed with the council. Tonight, I want it on Yoon Tae-il's table, before the tea is poured tomorrow. A pause. No, not yet. Cho, I will discuss in the morning. He set the phone down, turned, walked back to her. You have your terms, he said. Marcus Reed wakes up in a country that no longer recognizes him. He will not be killed for what he did to you. His eyes held hers. He may, however, eventually find his own way to a freeway overpass. I will not save him from that. That is not the same as you doing it. No, Han agreed. It is not. You are very careful, Naomi Carter, with what you let yourself owe. She thought she might cry then. She did not. She had not cried on 6th Street, and she would not cry here. Instead, she pulled the hem of the scarlet dress down over her knees, sat up straighter, and said, Where do I sleep? Something passed across his face that she could not read. There is a room, he said, at the end of the south corridor. The door locks from the inside. No one will enter it without your permission, not even me. He paused. Especially not me. Why? Because I am not Marcus Reed. The simplicity of it disarmed her in a way nothing else that night had. She looked down at her hands, at the small adhesive strip on her foot, at the obsidian table between them, and felt the first crack open in the wall she had built between this room and the rest of her life. She closed it again immediately, but she had felt it move. He stood, offered her his hand. She did not take it. She rose on her own, winced once when the cut took her weight, refused to acknowledge the wince. He walked beside her down the south corridor at a pace that matched hers. At a door of pale ash wood he stopped. Inside, there is a closet, he said. There are clothes. They will fit. There is a bathroom. There is a phone on the nightstand that only calls one number, which is mine. If you need anything, you press the green button. If something goes wrong, you press the red one twice. Bake will be at this door within 90 seconds. And if I open the door and walk out, you may walk to the kitchen, you may walk to the terrace, you may walk anywhere on this floor. You may not enter the elevator without me. The elevator will not accept your handprint until I tell it to. She nodded once, slow. Good night, Mr. Han. Sung-ho. Good night, Mr. Han. The corner of his mouth pulled again, almost a third smile. Good night, Naomi. She closed the door between them, turned the lock, listened to his footsteps recede down the corridor, the slow, even tread of a man who never hurried because nothing in the world had ever required him to. The room was larger than her entire apartment in Inglewood. She did not look at the bed. She walked straight to the bathroom, ran the shower hot enough to scald, peeled the scarlet dress off in pieces, and stood under the water with her forehead against the cold marble until her breathing evened. Only then did she allow herself one sentence, said aloud to no one, into the steam. Mama, I am in so much trouble. Outside her door, halfway down the corridor, Han Sung-ho stood at the glass wall of his own bedroom and looked east, toward Koreatown, toward the small, ugly building on Atlantic Boulevard where Baek Jun-woo had just placed a thin file on a broker's desk and was politely, in a voice like dry paper, explaining to Marcus Reed what the rest of his life was going to look like. Han watched the city. He thought about the way her chin had lifted when she said the word no. He thought about the fact that, in 12 years of running the Jongmi-pa, no one had ever revised his orders in his own home and walked away from the conversation with their teeth. He poured himself 2 fingers of soju over a single sphere of ice, drank it slowly, and for the first time since he was 24 years old, Han Sung-ho went to bed thinking about a problem that was not, technically, a problem he had set himself to solve. By the time the sun came up over the Hollywood Hills, Marcus Reed had been escorted out of his apartment in his socks. The locks had been changed before he reached the lobby. His phone had stopped working between the elevator and the street. His car was no longer in its space. A man in a gray coat handed him an envelope on the curb. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper with no letterhead and 4 lines of typed text. The first line was his full name. The second was the address of his mother in Bakersfield. The third was the address of his daughter's elementary school in Torrance. The 4th line read, "We know. Stay where we can find you. Do not contact Miss Carter." J. Marcus sat down on the curb in his socks and did not move for a very long time. 3 blocks away, in a black SUV parked under a jacaranda, Baek Jun-woo lowered his binoculars, dialed 1 number, and said only, "Done." Then he drove east, toward Hannam, toward a tea house, where an old man in a black hanbok was already awake, already pouring water, already waiting to hear which young woman had just made the most dangerous man in the city revise an order for the first time in a decade. In the penthouse, Naomi woke at 6:40 in a bed that smelled faintly of cedar and somebody else's laundry detergent. For a half second she did not remember. Then she did, all at once, and sat up so fast her vision grayed at the edges. The cut on her foot throbbed. The scarlet dress was gone from the bathroom floor. In its place, folded on a low bench, was a stack of clothes she had not chosen. Soft cream silk trousers, a black cashmere sweater, leather slippers, even underthings still in their tissue, her exact sizes. She did not want to think about how he knew. She dressed slowly, walked barefoot to the door, listened, heard nothing, turned the lock, opened it an inch. The corridor was empty. Warm sunlight had found its way through some skylight she could not see, and was lying in pale stripes across the walnut. She followed it to the kitchen. He was already there. Standing at the obsidian island in a black t-shirt fitted across the shoulders like a second skin, the rose tattoo fully visible now in daylight, slicing fruit on a wooden board, with the precise economy of a man who had at some point in his life been taught knife work for reasons that had nothing to do with breakfast. The dress shirt from the night before was nowhere. He looked, in this light, somehow larger and somehow younger. He did not turn when she came in. There is coffee. Thank you. He gestured at a low cup already poured. Black, no sugar. Exactly the way she took it. She did not ask. She drank. Bayek will come at 9, Han said, still slicing. He will bring 3 things. The first is a phone for you, on a number that does not exist on any carrier database. The second is a list of every person Marcus Reed contacted in the last 90 days. The third is the file the council will see this afternoon when I tell them that the woman at the head of my table is not, in fact, a hostage. You will read all 3 before you eat lunch. She set the cup down. The woman at the head of your table? Yes. That is not a phrase you used last night. No, he agreed. It is a phrase I used this morning, at 4, with Yoon Tail. Before he had finished his first pot of tea, he set the knife down, finally turned. His dark almond eyes met hers across the marble. You may refuse it. You may walk back to that room and lock the door and remain, until this is over, a woman my house is protecting. That is one shape of the contract. The other shape is that you sit at the head of the table this afternoon, in front of 7 men who have killed for less than you said no to in this living room last night, and you tell them yourself what you will and will not allow to happen in your name. I will not choose for you. I am telling you the choice exists. The kitchen was very quiet. Somewhere a kettle ticked as it cooled. Naomi felt the cut on her foot, the cedar on the sheets, the impossible softness of a sweater she had not bought, the weight of a city that had decided, between midnight and dawn, that her name was now a thing that mattered. She thought of her sister, of her nephew, of Marcus sitting on a curb in his socks somewhere in Long Beach, of a tea house in Hannum where an old man was waiting. She picked up the coffee, drank again, set it down. 9 o'clock, she said. Tell Baek I will be ready. Han Seung-ho did not smile this time, but something behind his eyes, the cold predatory thing she had first seen across a casino bar, shifted half a degree. Not warmth, not yet. Recognition. The look of a man who had just confirmed, against all reasonable odds, that the woman he had pulled out of the rain was going to be considerably harder to keep than she was to find. The day, Naomi would later understand, had not yet truly begun. The morning that followed did not arrive the way mornings usually arrive. There was no slow blue, no easing into light. The sky over Wilshire simply turned the color of brushed steel, all at once, as if a switch had been thrown by someone tired of waiting. Naomi stood at the floor-to-ceiling glass in a man's black dress shirt, 3 sizes too large for her, sleeves rolled twice, the hem brushing the top of her knees, bare feet on cold marble, a small white bandage along the arch of her left foot, coffee in both hands. She had not slept. Behind her, the penthouse breathed in that low, expensive way she was already starting to recognize. Soft hum of climate, soft hum of the city behind reinforced glass. No music, no television, no phone ringing. The most powerful man in the building moved through these rooms in a perimeter of pure silence, and the silence had a texture, and the texture made her chest tighten in a way she could not yet name. She heard him before she saw him. Not footsteps. Han Seung-ho walked like a cat in a museum. She heard the faint shift of starched cotton, the exhale of a man who had also not slept. She did not turn. You're up early, he said. I never went down. A pause. Then the soft tick of a porcelain cup being set on the obsidian counter behind her. He had brought a second coffee for himself. She watched his reflection in the glass. Black dress shirt again, fresh, the sleeves already rolled to the elbow, the rose tattoo climbing his neck like a thorned vein. The hair swept back, the eyes calm. Always those eyes, calm the way a frozen lake is calm. You're thinking about Marcus, he said. I'm thinking about a lot of things. Start with him. She turned then, slowly. The shirt slid a little off one shoulder, and she did not adjust it. He noticed. He pretended not to. She crossed the room and set her coffee down on the obsidian table between them, and sat on the low charcoal sofa, with her knees pressed together like a woman in a confessional booth. "There's something you don't know yet," she said. He waited. Marcus didn't just pawn me to pay a debt. She pressed her thumb against the rim of the cup. He used me as a payment plan. Han's expression did not change. She had begun to notice that the smaller the change, the more dangerous the moment. "Explain." 4 months ago, he started losing harder than usual. Parlay bets, live betting on Korean baseball at 3 in the morning because the games were the only ones still running. He blew through what he had. He blew through what he didn't have. Her voice was even. She had rehearsed this sentence in her head for 40 minutes while the coffee got cold. 2 months ago, he came to me, said he needed me to come to a dinner, said it was a client, said it would close a deal worth 6 figures. I told him I wasn't his date. He said it wasn't like that. He said the client was Korean, old school, conservative, and that he just needed to look like a man who had a beautiful girlfriend so the client would respect him. You went. I went. The dinner was at a private room in a restaurant in Garden Grove. There were 4 men. None of them were a client. The oldest one looked me up and down for 30 seconds without blinking, and then asked me, in English, to stand up and turn around. I said no. I stood up to leave. Marcus grabbed my wrist. The oldest man laughed. He said in Korean to one of the others, "She'll be worth it," and they all laughed, and Marcus laughed too, and I didn't understand a word, but I understood the laugh. Han set his cup down, very gently. "Continue." I walked out. Marcus followed me into the parking lot. He was crying. Actually crying. He told me he had signed something. He told me if I left him that night he was a dead man. I told him that was his problem. He grabbed me again, and I shoved him into a parked car and got an Uber home. She swallowed. 2 weeks later, a man I had never seen before knocked on the door of the dental office. He was Korean, stocky, short gray hair, a vertical scar through his right eyebrow. He sat in the waiting room next to a 4-year-old having his tooth pulled, and he smiled at me through the glass for an hour. Then he left a card on the reception desk and walked out. The card had no name, just a phone number and a small drawing of a tiger with a snake in its mouth. The cup in Han's hand stopped moving. It did not slam down. It did not rattle. It simply stopped, suspended in the air an inch above the obsidian, as if the man holding it had momentarily forgotten that gravity applied to him. "Cho Min-jae," he said, quiet. "I didn't know the name. I know it now. You're certain about the scar. Right eyebrow, vertical. About this long." She measured a small distance between her thumb and forefinger. He sat in my waiting room for 63 minutes. I counted them. Han set the cup down, stood, walked to the glass, put both hands behind his back, fingers laced, the way a general stands when the map in front of him has just stopped being a map and started being a verdict. "Finish it," he said. 3 nights ago, Marcus came to my apartment. He had a black eye and a split lip, and he smelled like he had bathed in vodka. He told me the debt had been transferred. He told me the man holding the paper was going to collect on Friday. He told me the collection wasn't money anymore. He told me if I came with him quietly to a hotel in Koreatown on Friday night, the debt would clear and I would be released in the morning. He used the word released, like I was a hostage being negotiated for. "You said yes." I said I needed 24 hours to think. I went home. I packed a bag. I called my sister. I told her if I didn't call her by Saturday noon, to go to the police, with 3 names and an address I had written on a piece of paper, taped under her kitchen sink. Then I sat on my kitchen floor for 30 hours, trying to decide whether to run or whether to walk into that hotel room and put a kitchen knife through Cho Min-jae's throat the second he touched me. The glass in front of Han fogged faintly where his breath hit it. And on Friday night, Marcus showed up at my door with 2 men I didn't know. They weren't Korean. They were the ones Cho had hired to deliver me. Marcus had told them where I lived. Marcus had told them what I'd be wearing. Marcus had picked the dress. Her voice did not shake. I went out the bedroom window. I ran. I ran in heels because that was what I was wearing, and I ran toward Koreatown because that was the only part of town I knew where a black woman in a red dress wouldn't be the only thing people were looking at. I picked your casino because it had the most cars outside. I picked your back because you were the biggest thing in the room. I picked you, Han Sung-ho, because you looked like the only thing in California that Cho Min-jae might be afraid of. She finished. She did not break eye contact. She did not breathe. Han stood at the glass for a long, long moment. The brushed steel sky behind him had begun, very slowly, to take on a thin pink stain at its eastern edge. When he finally turned, his face had not changed at all, and yet everything in the room had. Marcus Reed pledged a woman as collateral, he said. The words came out flat, almost academic. To Cho Min-jae, inside the borders of my city, without seeking permission from my house, without paying tribute, without acknowledging that the territory in which the transaction occurred was Jangmi-pa ground. She did not answer. She understood it was not a question. He didn't just sell you, Naomi. His eyes met hers. He used you to insult me. I didn't know. I know you didn't. That isn't the point. He walked to the obsidian table and picked up a small black device that looked like a fountain pen and was not. He pressed once. Somewhere in the apartment, a door opened, soundless. The point is that two men decided, this week, that the rose on my neck did not mean what it means. The point is that the entire western quarter of this city has spent 48 hours under the impression that Han Sung-ho can be tested. He set the pen-shaped device back on the obsidian. That impression dies today. Footsteps now, soft, measured. Baek Jun-woo came through the entryway, already dressed for the day. Thin rim glasses catching the gray light, black suit, no tie, a slim leather folio under his left arm. He stopped 3 meters from the sofa and bowed his head 1 degree to Han, then 1 degree, more carefully, to Naomi. She had been a guest 12 hours ago. She had become something else in the night, and Baek's posture was the first confirmation of it. Sajangnim. Jun-woo. Han did not look away from Naomi. Marcus Reed, Long Beach, commercial real estate broker, failing. I have his file. Of course you do. Bak opened the folio, a single sheet. He held it up so Han could read it without taking it from his hands. Han read it in 2 seconds. Bank accounts. 3 personal, 2 business, 1 offshore he believes is hidden. Combined liquid, 81,000. Liabilities, 471,000, of which 312 are sports-related. The remaining 60 are credit card. The office on Atlantic Avenue. Leased. 2 months behind. The landlord is one of ours, through a third holding. The condo in San Pedro. His name, underwater. Mortgage held by a bank we own a controlling stake in via the Daejin Trust. The car. Financed, same bank. The girlfriend in Torrance. Baek paused, adjusted his glasses 1 millimeter. She also exists. She believes her name is on the lease in San Pedro. It is not. His mother. Alive. Bakersfield. Healthy. Not relevant. Good. Han's gaze moved, at last, from Naomi's face to the sheet of paper. Erase him. Sajangnim. His name. From the world. By tomorrow morning. Baek did not blink. Define erase. Bank accounts frozen by sundown. Office padlocked. Condo repossessed. Car towed before lunch. Phone disconnected. The girlfriend informed, by a friend, that he has another woman in Long Beach. The young pa told, by a friend of a friend, that Marcus Reed lied to them about the collateral he offered, that the woman in question was already promised to Jangmi-pa, and that Marcus Reed himself is now available, gift-wrapped, in lieu of the missing payment. By tomorrow morning, the only thing left of him is breath, and the breath belongs to me to decide about. And Cho Min-jae. Han's jaw moved once. Cho is a separate conversation. Cho receives a visit. Not from you. Not yet. I want him to spend tonight wondering. I want him to spend tomorrow knowing. I want him to spend the day after that, begging the council for an audience he will not be granted. By the time I see him in person, I want him to understand that a vertical scar on the right eyebrow is a temporary condition. He paused. Move. Beck bowed. 1 degree, turned, was gone. The soft door closed behind him with no sound. Naomi had not moved from the sofa. The coffee in her hands had gone cold. She set it down on the obsidian table without looking at it, because she could not look away from him. You just, she said. Her voice did not break. Exactly. It bent. You just dismantled a man's entire life in 40 seconds, while drinking coffee. He pledged you as meat. Han crossed the room slowly, stopped a meter from her, did not sit. He laughed when Cho Min-jae looked you up and down in a private room in Garden Grove. He picked the dress you were wearing when you ran for your life through 6th Street in the rain. 40 seconds is the longest I have spent on a man like that in 9 years. And Cho. Cho is a clan boss. Cho requires architecture. Cho will take a week. He tilted his head 1 degree, but yes, Cho will also stop existing in the shape he currently occupies. That is also a promise. She felt it then. Finally, the thing she had been holding back all night. Not fear, not relief, something stranger. The slow, terrifying click of a door closing behind her in a building she had not chosen to enter, and the simultaneous, equally terrifying click of a different door opening in front of her in a corridor she had not known existed. Han. Yes. I came here to survive the night. I know. I did not come here to become a queen of anything. The corner of his mouth lifted, 0.5 millimeter. The second smile. She had counted both now. I know that also. He sat, finally, on the obsidian table directly in front of her, elbows on his knees, the rose at his throat at eye level. Up close, she could see that the single blooming flower had a tiny, almost invisible drop of red ink at its heart, like the rose had been wounded by its own thorn. But the man who pledged you and the man who bought you both believed they were trading a thing. The only language they understand, the only language the entire western quarter of this city understands, is the language of what a thing belongs to. So for the next 72 hours, in the eyes of every dangerous man in Los Angeles, you will belong to me. Loudly, publicly, in a way that cannot be misunderstood. And after 72 hours? He looked at her. He did not answer immediately. He looked at her the way a man looks at the first honest question he has been asked in a very long time. After 72 hours, he said, we will have a different conversation. A conversation that will be only yours and mine. A conversation in which the word belong will be examined more carefully. I am not promising you what that conversation will conclude. I am promising you that it will happen, and that I will listen. She held his gaze. The sky behind him was no longer steel. It was a thin, pale gold along the eastern horizon now, the first real color of the day, and the gold light reached across the marble floor and stopped at the edge of the obsidian table, as if even the sun, in this room, asked permission before it advanced. All right, she said. All right. He stood, walked to the door Beck had used, stopped with one hand on the frame. Naomi. Yes. Do not leave the building today. Anywhere you wish to go inside it, go. The roof, the library, the pool on the 38th floor. Anywhere. But do not cross the lobby. By sundown the city will know your face, and until I have shown the city what your face means, the lobby is not safe for you. Where are you going? To erase a man. He glanced back, once, and to send a message to another one that he should have left in a coffin. The door closed behind him, soft, final, bulletproof. She stood alone in the center of the penthouse in a black dress shirt 3 sizes too large for her, a bandage on her foot, and a cup of cold coffee on an obsidian table that had been carved from a single slab of stone. Beyond the glass, the city of Los Angeles spread out in waking gold. 11 million people who did not yet know that somewhere above Wilshire, the most dangerous man in their county, had just spent 40 seconds reorganizing the architecture of two lives on behalf of a woman whose name, 12 hours earlier, had not existed inside the borders of his world. She walked back to the glass, pressed her palm flat against it. The glass was cold, her palm was warm. The print she left behind faded in seconds, the way breath fades on a mirror, the way a woman fades when no one is watching. But someone, now, was watching. Someone with the resources of an entire kingdom and the patience of a man who had spent a decade learning to wait. Naomi Carter watched the gold light climb the side of a building across the avenue and understood, with a clarity that made her hands shake for the first time since the alley, that she had not actually escaped anything last night. She had simply moved, in a single rain-slicked sprint, from one cage into another. The new cage was warmer, the new cage was higher, the new cage had a view. The new cage, she was beginning to suspect, also had a door, and the man who held the key was not, in any way she had been taught to recognize, the kind of man who used keys to keep women in. He was the kind of man who used them to keep the world out. The door of the penthouse opened at 4 a.m. without anyone knocking, and Naomi knew, before she lifted her head from the silk pillow, that something inside the building had shifted, the way a house shifts when a load-bearing wall is removed. She had not slept. She had lain on her side in the dark, fully dressed in the scarlet satin that smelled now of rain and cigarette smoke and a stranger's cologne, and she had counted the seconds between the distant hum of the elevator and the soft tread of unfamiliar shoes on marble. Each count had stretched longer than the last. At 3:57, the elevator hummed and did not stop. Baek Junwoo entered first. He did not turn on a light. He set a slim black folder on the low table by the window and stood with his hands clasped at the small of his back, glasses catching the city glow, waiting for her to sit up. He did not speak until she did. The respect, she understood at once, was not for her. It was for whatever Han had said about her in a room she had not been allowed into. "Miss Carter," he said. His English was precise, almost surgical. "The boss requests your presence on the lower floor. 20 minutes. Wear what is in the closet to your left, not the red." She rose. The satin whispered against her thighs as she crossed the room, and she felt his eyes deliberately not follow her. The closet to her left held 3 garments she had not chosen and 1 pair of low-heeled black boots. She picked the simplest: black wool trousers cut high at the waist, a cream silk blouse buttoned to the throat, a long charcoal coat that fell to mid-calf. She braided her hair back from her face in one thick rope and did not look at her own reflection while she did it. The woman in the mirror would have asked questions she was not ready to answer. When she emerged, Beck inclined his head a 1/4 inch and gestured to the elevator. The doors closed on the two of them, and the car descended past floors she had not known existed. 41, 28, 12. 3 sublevels marked only in Korean. The car stopped at the deepest one, and the doors opened onto a corridor of polished black concrete, lit by a single line of cold white at the ceiling. The air smelled of bleach and motor oil, and something underneath that her body recognized before her mind did: fear sweat, not hers. Han was waiting at the far end of the corridor. He had changed. The Egyptian cotton dress shirt was gone. He wore a black turtleneck pushed to the elbows, and the same fitted trousers from the casino, and his hair was slightly damp at the temples, as though he had splashed water on his face, and not bothered to dry it. The rose tattoo climbed the left side of his neck and disappeared into the high collar. He watched her walk the length of the corridor without moving. When she reached him, he lifted one hand and brushed his knuckles along the cuff of her coat, the lightest possible contact, as if testing whether the wool was real. "You slept?" he said. "No." "Good." He turned and opened the door behind him. "Then you will not miss anything." She stepped through, and the smell hit her at full strength. The room was a garage, or had been built to look like one. Concrete floor sloped to a central drain. A single hydraulic lift stood empty in the center. Against the far wall, under a bank of fluorescent tubes, a man was tied to a steel chair bolted to the floor. His head hung forward. A gray suit jacket had been thrown over the back of the chair. The shirt underneath was soaked through at the collar with something that was not water. Marcus Reed lifted his head when the door closed. His left eye was already swollen shut. His weak chin was webbed with dried blood from a split lip. He saw her and made a sound that began as her name and collapsed halfway through into a wet animal noise she had never heard a grown man make. She felt her own legs lock at the knees. She did not move. Han walked her forward, with one hand at the small of her back. He did not push. He simply placed his palm there, and the pressure of his palm was the only thing in the room that felt warm. He stopped her 3 paces from the chair. 22 hours, he said quietly, as if reading from a ledger. His brokerage license was revoked at 9 yesterday morning. His 3 accounts at City National were frozen at 10. The lease on his Long Beach office was voided at noon by the building's true owner, who happens to owe me a favor from 2019. By 2, his name was removed from the bookmakers in 3 counties. By 4, the Yongpa enforcers who were holding his marker received a visit and a number. They returned the marker at 5. By 8, his wife signed papers she had been afraid to sign for 6 years. By midnight, there was no Marcus Reed left on any system that matters. There is only this. He tilted his chin toward the chair. What you see is the residue. Marcus's good eye fixed on her. Naomi. Naomi, please. Naomi. Tell him. Tell him I didn't know. Tell him I didn't know what they were. I owed 80 grand. 80. They said they'd take it in trade. I thought they meant work. I thought they meant a job. Naomi, I swear on my mother, I thought they meant a job. She did not answer. She could not, yet. Her tongue had gone to leather behind her teeth. She kept her hands at her sides, because she did not trust what they would do if she lifted them. She had loved this man for 2 years. She had cooked for him. She had paid his half of the rent for 9 months when his commissions disappeared. She had sat across a kitchen table from him, while he wept about his father, and she had stroked his thinning hair and told him he was a good man who had been dealt a bad hand. She had believed it. The believing had been the worst part. The believing was what had sent her running down a wet Koreatown sidewalk in a scarlet dress with men behind her who had been told to bring her back in any condition that still permitted resale. You signed me, she said. Her voice came out level. The levelness surprised her. You signed me over to them like a car title. It wasn't like that, Naomi. It wasn't like that. They said a week. They said a week of dinners. Just dinners. With the boss's nephew or whatever. I thought I'd make the money back before the week was up. You made the money back at the table that same night, she said. She remembered now. She remembered him laughing on the phone in the bathroom with the door not quite closed. She had thought he was talking to his brother. I heard you. You won 12,000 on a hockey game, and you called someone and you laughed. He stopped speaking. The good eye slid sideways. Han had not moved. His hand was still at the small of her back. She could feel the heat of his palm through wool and silk and skin. He had not looked at Marcus once since she began to speak. He was watching her face the way a man watches a fuse. Naomi, Marcus tried again. The voice was smaller now. Naomi, we can fix this. We can fix this. Tell him I'll work. Tell him I'll do anything. I'll bring him clients. I know guys in Pasadena, real money guys. I can. Stop, she said. He stopped. Bake had entered the room behind them at some point. She had not heard the door. He stood now at Han's left shoulder, holding a flat black case the size of a hardcover book. He did not open it. He waited. Han's free hand drifted toward the case and hovered there, fingers not quite touching the lid, and he turned his face to hers at last, and looked at her with the cold, predatory stillness she had seen across the bar in the Crimson Lotus, and he said, in a voice pitched only for her, "Say the word." She understood the word. He had not named it because naming it would have placed the weight on him, and he wanted the weight to sit, this once, exactly where it belonged. She understood that he was offering her the cleanest mathematics of his world. A man had sold her. A man had to be erased. The erasure was already 99% complete. The final percent was a courtesy extended to the woman who had been the merchandise. She could nod, she could say yes, she could say the Korean word she did not know, and he would say it for her. Beck would open the case. The thing inside the case would not be loud, because in this room, nothing was permitted to be loud. And then the hydraulic lift would do whatever hydraulic lifts in rooms like this were built to do, and by sunrise, there would be no Marcus Reed even in the residue. She felt the offer settle on her shoulders like a coat made of lead. She felt, for one long, honest second, how much of her wanted to wear it. Then she stepped out from under Han's hand. She did it slowly so he would not mistake the motion for fear. She walked the 3 paces to the chair, and she crouched in front of Marcus, so her face was level with his, and she let him see her eyes properly, for the first time since she had loved him. The good eye watered, the swollen one twitched. "Marcus," she said, "look at me." "I'm looking. Naomi, I'm looking. You were the smallest man in every room you ever walked into. You wanted to be big, and you didn't want to do the work, and so you found a woman who would make you feel big for free. And when free wasn't enough anymore, you found men who would lend you the rest at interest. And when the interest came due, you sold the only thing you had that was worth anything. And the only thing you had that was worth anything was me." She paused. She did not raise her voice. "I am telling you this, so you hear it from my mouth, and not from the silence after. Are you hearing me?" Yes. It was barely a word. "You are not worth what is in that case." She did not turn her head, but she knew Han could hear her, and she knew Becca could hear her, and she knew the cold concrete walls could hear her. "You are not worth the bullet. You are not worth the bleach they would have to use after. You are not worth 1 hour of this man's time. You are going to live. You are going to live with no name and no money and no license and no woman and no city. And you are going to live every one of those mornings remembering that the only reason you are still breathing is because the woman you sold decided you weren't expensive enough to kill." She stood. Her knees did not shake. She was surprised by this, and then she was not surprised. She turned to Han. He had not moved. The black case was still closed in Bake's hands. "Put him on a bus," she said. "Out of state, tonight. If I ever see his face in California again, I will come to you myself, and I will ask for the case. Do you understand me?" There was a silence in the room then that was different from the silence that had come before. It had weight and shape. Beck's eyes flicked, just once, from her to Han and back to her, and she saw something move in them that might have been the closest a man like Beck ever came to astonishment. Han did not look at Beck. Han looked only at her. The almond eyes had gone very still. The corner of his mouth, the same corner that had lifted a 1/4 inch in the crimson lotus before he kissed her, lifted again. Not a smile. The ghost of one. The seed. "Jun-woo," he said. He did not break her gaze. A bus, Greyhound, Bakersfield, then east. Cash for 2 weeks. No phone. If he speaks her name aloud between here and the Mississippi, the arrangement is void. A pause. She has spoken. It is done. Back bowed from the neck. "Yes, Hyungnim." Han extended his hand to her then, palm up, open, the way a man extends a hand to a woman across a ballroom floor, and not the way a man extends a hand to a woman in a concrete room with a drain in the center. She looked at the hand. She looked at his face. She put her fingers in his. He closed his hand around hers, and the warmth of it traveled up her arm and into her chest, and lodged there, somewhere underneath the place where the fear had been living for 31 hours, and she felt the fear loosen 1 finger at a time. He did not lead her past the chair. He led her around it, the long way, so she would not have to look at Marcus again unless she chose to. She did not choose to. At the door he stopped. He turned her to face him. He lifted his free hand and tucked a single strand of hair, which had escaped her braid during the crouch, behind her ear. The gesture was so domestic and so absurd in that room that she nearly laughed. She did not laugh. She held very still. You gave a first order in my house, he said. The voice was low, almost private, almost amused. Do you know what that means? Tell me. It means there will be a second. He opened the door and walked her out into the corridor of black concrete and cold white light, and behind them, the door closed on Marcus Reed and on the residue of a man, and somewhere above them a bus station was opening its grates for the 4:30 departure, and somewhere above that, the sky over Wilshire was beginning the long, slow business of turning from black to gray to the color of new bone. In the elevator, he did not release her hand. He stood at her shoulder and watched the floor numbers climb, and the warmth of his palm against hers was the only sensation in her body that felt continuous with the woman she had been 24 hours earlier. Everything else was new. The clothes were new. The braid was new. The voice that had crouched in front of Marcus and decided who lived and who was erased was new, and she did not yet know whether she had borrowed that voice from the man beside her, or whether the voice had been inside her all along and had simply been waiting for a room cold enough to use it. At 41, the doors opened. The penthouse was full of pale dawn light. He walked her to the long window, and he stood behind her, and he did not touch her except for the hand he had never released, and together they watched the sun come up over a city that did not yet know its arithmetic had changed in the night. A man had been erased. A woman had not nodded when she had been invited to. Somewhere between those two refusals, a thing had been built that neither of them had names for yet. Naomi, he said, the first time he had used her name. Yes. Eat something. Then sleep. The council meets in 36 hours, and they will want to look at you. She turned her head a fraction. Will they get to? The ghost of the smile came back. It stayed a beat longer this time. That, he said, will be your second order. The car pulled away from the garage in San Pedro before the smell of gasoline left her hair. Naomi sat with her hands flat on her own knees, palms down, fingers spread, the way a woman sits when she is willing them to stop trembling. Han did not speak. He watched the freeway lights slide across the window, across her face, across the small red mark on her wrist where she had pressed too hard against the wall. He saw the mark. He did not mention it. They drove east, not toward Wilshire. Naomi noticed the turn and said nothing. The driver took the 110 to the 101 and the 101 to a side street in Hannam Village that she had never seen on any map a tourist would buy. The buildings here were low. The signs were in Korean only. A woman in a long gray apron was sweeping the sidewalk in front of a wooden door with no name above it, only a single carved camellia. She looked up when the car stopped, bowed once at the waist without surprise, and pushed the door open. Han stepped out first. He held the door of the car with one hand and offered the other. Naomi looked at the offered hand for a full second before she took it. The fingers that closed around hers were warm. They were always warm. That, more than anything else tonight, was what kept undoing her. Inside, the tea room smelled of roasted barley and old cedar. A square, low table sat on a tatami platform. 2 cushions. 1 iron kettle already breathing steam. No guards, no bake, no phone on the table. The woman in the apron poured water over the leaves, bowed again, and slid the paper screen shut behind her. For a long moment the only sound was the kettle settling. Han took off his jacket. He folded it once, lengthwise, and laid it across the arm of the platform with the care of a man putting down a weapon. Then he sat. He did not sit the way he had sat in the casino, or in the penthouse, or at the head of the long lacquered table where his men ate. He sat with his knees forward and his shoulders loose and his hands open on his thighs. He looked, for the first time since she had crashed into his back, like a man who weighed what a man weighed. "Drink," he said. She drank. The tea was bitter at the edge and sweet at the back of the throat. It hit something under her sternum that the adrenaline had been holding shut for 2 days, and her eyes filled before she could stop them. She did not let the water fall. She set the cup down with both hands. "You did not let me kill him," Han said. His voice was lower in this room, less command, more something she did not have a name for yet. No. Why? She thought about it. She owed him the real answer. She owed herself the real answer more. Because if you killed him for me, then the first thing you ever did in my name would be a murder, she said. And I would have to live inside that for the rest of my life. I would look at your hands and see his blood. I would touch your face and taste it. I am not strong enough to love a man through that kind of mirror. So I stopped you for me, not for him. He took that in. He did not flinch. He did not look away. He looked the way a man looks at a doctor who has just named the thing. Love, he said. Not a question. Not quite agreement either. He turned the word over the way he turned everything, examining it for weight. I did not say I love you, she said. I said I am not strong enough. That is the same sentence. I know. The kettle clicked once on its stand. He poured for her without asking, refilled the cup, set the pot down precisely on the cork pad. His sleeves were rolled to the forearm. The tendons moved under the skin. The thorned rose disappeared up under the collar of the black shirt, and she thought, suddenly and without permission, of how young the boy must have been who first sat still long enough for that needle. How old were you, she said, when you got it? 24. And before that? His eyes lifted to hers, dark, steady. The predator was still in there. It would always be in there. But behind it tonight was a second animal she had not seen before, smaller and older, and far more tired. Before that, I had a sister, he said. She did not move. She did not breathe loud. She had spent her childhood at the foot of her grandmother's chair, learning to listen the way a deer listens, and she listened like that now. Her name was Han So-yeon. She was 19. She was studying pharmacy at Yonsei. She wore a yellow coat in winter that was too thin for the wind off the river, and she would not let our mother buy her another, because she said she had picked it herself, with her own money from her own job, and the coat was the proof. She walked home from the night library on a Tuesday in February. She did not arrive. The kettle breathed. It took our father 11 days to find her. He was not a powerful man. He sold ginseng in a market stall in Jongno. He had no money to pay anyone to look, so he looked himself. He found her in a storage room behind a club in Itaewon that belonged to a man named Park Gi-cheol, who at that time held the southern half of what is now my territory. Park had taken her for a debt my father did not owe. The debt had been invented for him by a cousin who wanted my father's stall and knew that grief is cheaper than a court. His hands had not moved. His voice had not moved. Only the muscle along his jaw was alive, working slow. My father went to the police. The police were Park's. He went to the district office. The district office was Park's. He came home on the 11th night, and he sat on the floor of our kitchen, and he did not stand up again for 3 days. My mother fed him with a spoon. I was 23. I was a graduate student in industrial engineering. I had a fiancé. I had a future that fit on a single page. On the 4th day, I stood up instead of him. I went to the only door in Seoul that was not Park's, the Jungmi-pa door. The man who answered it was Yoon Tae-il. He was younger then, not much. He listened to me for 40 minutes without speaking. At the end, he said one sentence. He said, "Boy, if you walk back out of this room, you walk back into the life you had. If you walk forward into this house, you walk into mine, and there is no second door." I walked forward. 12 months later, Park Ji-cheol was a name on no street in this city. 18 months later, the southern half was ours. 30 months later, I sat at the head of the table because the men who had sat there before me had decided, all at once, that I should. The rose on my neck is hers, the single bloom, because she only got one spring. He stopped. He picked up his cup. He drank. Naomi did not speak for a long time. The room was so quiet she could hear the wood of the platform settling under his weight, hers, the slow contraction of the kettle as it cooled. She could feel the place under her ribs where her grandmother used to press a thumb when she was small and frightened. The press said, "Be still. The frightened thing inside the frightened thing is what you protect now. Your fiancé," she said finally. She married a dentist. They live in Bundong. They have 2 daughters. The older one is named So-yeon. She does not know why. And your mother? She lives above a tea room in Insadong that I bought for her in a name that is not mine. She believes I am an executive at a logistics company in Busan. She has believed this for 10 years. Once a month I send her a card, and she sends me a sweater she has knitted herself. The sweaters do not fit. I wear them anyway in the apartment when no one is there. Naomi closed her eyes. She let one tear go. Just one. She did not wipe it. "Han Sung-ho," she said. "Yes. You did not tell me this to make me stay." "No. You told me this because tonight, in that garage, I gave you an order, and you obeyed it, and that has not happened to you in 12 years. And you needed me to know what kind of man it is that just bent." He looked at her. The second animal behind his eyes was very close to the surface now. "Yes," he said. She set her cup down. She moved across the low table on her knees, slow, the scarlet dress pooling around her thighs, and she stopped with her face a hand's width from his. She did not touch him. She let him see her looking. "You do not have to own me to have me," she said. "You do not have to mark me to keep me. You do not have to put a wall around me to know where I am. I am here. I came through your door once, because men were going to kill me. I am sitting in front of you now, because no one is going to kill me tonight, and I am still here. Do you understand the difference?" His throat moved. "Say it," she said, softer than she had ever said anything to him. "I understand the difference." "Good." She lifted one hand. She laid it, very lightly, against the side of his neck where the rose stem began. She felt his pulse jump once under her palm, and then steady, slower than her own, the great patient drum of a man who had taught his heart years ago to be quieter than the room. "Then we begin again," she said. "Not the woman in the red dress on the bar, not the property of Jang Mi-pa, Naomi Carter, of Inglewood, born to Denise Carter, who raised 3 girls on one salary and never once let any of us call ourselves small. And you, whoever you decide to be when you are not the rose. Begin there." He closed his eyes. He turned his face one slow degree into her palm. It was not a kiss. It was not a surrender either. Not exactly. It was the gesture of a man setting something down he had been carrying so long he had forgotten the shape of his own hand without it. "Naomi," he said. "Yes, there is a council tomorrow night. I know. Yoon Tae-il has called it. He has the right. He helped make me. He will ask me to choose. I know. He will not ask politely. I did not think he would. If I choose you, the table fractures. There will be blood. Not all of it will be theirs. I know that too. If I choose the table, you live. You walk out of the city tonight with new papers and a new name and a house in a country where no one has heard of the Jang Mi-pa. You will be safe in a way no woman who has ever stood near me has been safe. You will also never see me again." She did not move her hand from his neck. "Han Sung-ho," she said. "Yes. You are not the one who chooses tomorrow night." He opened his eyes. "What? You sat me at the head of your table in your own apartment 2 days ago, and you called it a small thing. It was not a small thing. You knew it was not a small thing when you did it. Tomorrow, when the council sits, you will not choose between me and the table. You will let me sit at the table, and the council will choose whether they want to keep their seats with me at the head of it, or whether they want to leave." For a long moment, he did not speak. She watched the calculation move behind his face, and she watched, under it, the second animal, the tired one, the one with the sister, open its eyes wide for the first time. "They will refuse," he said. "Some of them. Then some of them will leave. Yoon Tae-il is not some of them. He is the floor of the room." Then he will choose what floor he wants to be. He raised me. He raised the rose. I am asking the man. Han Sung-ho looked at her for a long time. Outside the paper screen, the woman in the gray apron was sweeping again, slow, the soft rasp of straw on stone. The kettle had gone cold. The barley smell had thinned. Somewhere over Hanam, a single low plane was descending toward LAX, and Naomi could feel its sound more than hear it, a slow vibration in the wood of the platform under her knees. He lifted his own hand. He laid it over hers on his neck. He did not press. He only held it there, palm to palm, the way a man holds a thing he has decided not to drop. "All right," he said. "All right what?" "All right, sit. At the table. At the head of the table. Tomorrow. Tomorrow." She let out the breath she had not known she was holding. It came out shaky. She let it be shaky. She had decided, somewhere between the garage and this room, that she was done editing the noises her own body made in front of this man. "One more thing," she said. "Yes. When we walk into that room tomorrow night, you do not walk in front of me. You do not walk behind me, you walk beside me. If Yoon Tae-il sees your shoulder first, he will know what to do with me. If he sees mine first, he will spend the rest of his life looking for the angle. I do not want him to have an angle. I want him to have a wall." The ghost of the smile came back. It stayed. It became, for the first time since she had met him, a thing that touched his eyes. "Beside you," he said. "Beside me. Naomi." "Yes. This is the third order. I am counting." He laughed. One short sound. Almost nothing. The kind of laugh a man laughs when he has not laughed in a very long time, and the muscle is rusty. It was the most dangerous sound she had heard in 2 days, because it was the sound of a man with nothing left to defend. She took her hand off his neck. She sat back on her heels. The scarlet dress was creased. Her hair was no longer perfect. There was tea on her lower lip, and she did not wipe it. She had never in her life felt more like a woman who could not be moved. "Take me home," she said. "To Wilshire. To wherever you sleep tonight. I do not want you on the other side of any door." He stood. He offered his hand again. She took it without looking at it this time, because she already knew the temperature of his fingers, and she knew that she would know it now for as long as she had a pulse to feel them with. At the door, the woman in the gray apron bowed to Naomi first. Not to Han, to Naomi. Han noticed. Han did not correct it. Outside, the air over Hanam smelled of rain that had not yet fallen. The driver opened the back door of the car, and Naomi got in, and Han got in after her, and the door closed, and the city kept being the city, indifferent, enormous, full of men who did not yet know that the head of the longest table in Koreatown had just, very quietly, in a tea room with no name, become 2.
If the story stayed with you even after the screen went dark, know this, it doesn't end here. Our private community is the extension of this channel. Every story ad-free. No interruptions. No breaks in the atmosphere. Bonus scenes and extra chapters the public version doesn't show. And for the inner circle, one of our 3 tiers, one brand new exclusive full-length story every month. Plus the sensual chapters reserved only for the chair you're sitting in. 3 doors in. Scan the QR code on your screen, tap the link in the pinned comment, or follow the link in the description below. Your name belongs on the next page.
If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever asked a stranger to save you because the people who claimed to love you sold you out first? Would you have the courage Naomi had, to look a man like Han in the eyes and refuse to be his property even while he was saving your life? And when the world finally tried to choose for you, would you take the seat at the head of the table? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, dangerous love, and the awakening of a queen, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.